validating is that. And hold on one second. Okay. And I had spent the last, 15 years in my own personal coming out in Orthodox communities, kind of like organizing and trying to create community with my friends, and then finding more women who existed within Orthodox community who were lesbians and transgender women and bisexual women. And so it was kind of like my own journey, but also just trying to find other people in community. And then I found it in this text, in this Maimonides writing about this group of women. And so that was reflecting my experience. So so in New Haven, when I was, when I was a new mother, I decided to try to find other stories and put it in print so other people could have stories that they could find themselves in, because I didn't have that. And I often talk about the very first time that I felt reflected in any story was when I discovered this book called Lesbian Nuns Breaking Silence. And it was very similar to my experience. And it was like 50 stories of nuns coming out. And the funny thing, another small world thing, is when I moved to Minnesota, I just Googled the editor of that anthology, and she lived like, a few miles from my house, and we took a walk around the lake, and it was really wonderful to meet her and to tell her how much her book was an inspiration for this anthology. So, so after that time of collecting all those stories, I had sort of like widened the circle and learned more about more people in my community and in other communities. And, it wasn't until 10 or 15 years later that I started this organization called Eshel, which is a much more above ground organization that really deals right within Orthodox communities and traditional communities. We often get calls from conservative Jews or conservative synagogues or community day schools on how to integrate LGBTQ people in their communities. So yeah, so that's how it all began for me. I mean, it started very early in my coming out, but then it just kind of like, evolved. And so I guess the question I have for everybody is, what do you think within Becky are the barriers to inclusion for LGBTQ people? And it might be hard to get yourselves into the mindset of what it is to be LGBTQ. But I actually asked my partner, Mara, I said, Mara, like, did you feel included at Becky when we were there? And she said, well, I didn't feel excluded. And, and I felt very welcome, and I think she did too. So it wasn't that we actually felt, on the margins at all. But I guess the question is, and Shoshana, is this okay if I move into this area,
yes,
or did
absolutely.
you want to ask me
absolutely.
more about great. My background? Or okay, so great. And I'm happy to answer any of the questions. But I was wondering if we could just put into the chat, what are the barriers that you think exist at Becky? And if you can think of yourselves like, maybe the way to think about it is, how do you feel included if you are heterosexual or cisgender? Like, it's hard to think about this, but like, what if you can imagine like the ways that you feel an ease there and welcome there, and then think about, would somebody who's LGBTQ feel welcome and at ease the same way? So why don't we just put it in the chat, and we'll just see what people have to say. If you don't want to do it, if you want to do it anonymously, you can chat me personally, and I will just read it out without saying your name if you'd like. Okay, so someone wrote, how would I know if someone is not cisgender? Okay, that's a good question. Okay. So barriers to inclusion, like what do you think is a heteronormative language that's being used at Becky, or on your website, in your application for membership? Okay, we didn't find that there were any barriers. Becky is extraordinarily unique in that we were never tokenized and completely embraced. Beautiful. There's never been any explicit institutional acknowledgement. Okay. Since I spend most of my time with people in my general age group, people like me, I would think that LGBTQ people would find it harder to find as large a group of similar people to them. Okay, hi Sasha. I think that overall Becky is genuinely welcoming to LGBTQ people, but there are no obvious signs that this is the case when you walk in. Okay, good. I'm gonna come back to that. Okay, anyone else?
You want to check? You can just put your name at the bottom.
Okay, as a woman, I feel included because I'm welcome to wear tefillin, lane, aliyah, lead services, etc. Great. The main page of the Becky website says, Becky invites Jews of all ages, races, and gender identities without regard to economic status or level of Jewish learning. Our warm, engaging, egalitarian community is a joyous home for all Jews in Greater New Haven. Shalom and welcome. Okay, wonderful. You might say sexual orientation, you might add that. Okay.
Oh, good comment.
The language of the Torah and the Siddur is highly gendered and patriarchal. Our warts and all embrace of the Torah might be off-putting. Very good. Okay, that is definitely something that I have heard and that I try to eke out from people to say, like, yes, in fact, just open up Vayikra and you see things that are hard and any other language of the Torah. Now, as a traditionalist, I don't believe in changing the language to make ourselves feel better. I believe in, personally, my bent is to just, encounter it and deal with it and think about it. And I treat the Torah like a family member. You're not always comfortable. You don't always agree, but you love them and you embrace them. Okay, let's see. Our new rabbi is particularly conscious of this issue and we will likely see even more inclusivity. Wonderful. Can you explain they there? I'm going to try, Betsy. I don't know if I can. Okay, all right. These are all really wonderful. I'm sure more will come in, but maybe we can just stop. And okay, wonderful, Lyndon, thank you. Our old rabbi is one of the first clergy to perform a trans wedding. Okay. So what I want to just say is that there are so many low-hanging fruit that I'm not even sure happen at Becky, but in some sense, they probably should just happen without a big committee, without a lot of discussion, because they're so easy to do. If you don't have any signage or any, but by the way, because of my discussion with Shoshana in preparation for this evening, I'm just going to say, I think it's within your value system to want to be projecting welcoming LGBTQ people. So like, we're not going to question that. If you were an Orthodox synagogue, I would completely start in a different place. But we're just going to say Becky wants to be welcoming to all Jews, whether regardless of their gender or sexuality. So the lowest hanging fruit is a symbol. It's a sticker. It's a, whether it's a safe space sticker or, safe zone or LGBTQ Jews are welcome, trans Jews are welcome. It's so very simple. Nobody has to say a word. It's just there when somebody walks in. So that is like one of the easiest things to do. I would also say that, on your forms, you have to question whether it says mother or father of a child as opposed to guardian, husband, wife. Are people speaking from the Bima in gendered language? And it's very easy to change that language to be non-gendered. You can say, instead of husband or wife, you could say partner, and it merely makes a huge difference to people. One thing that I had discussed with you, Shoshana, it was like with aliyot. There is some language that I can share with people later, or that I can share with you, Shoshana, later. You could pass it on. When you call people up to the Torah, it's very gendered. It's, ta'amod if it's a woman, ya'amod if it's a man. So there's ways to do this in, you know, for somebody who doesn't want to be gendered, and it's nala amod. And instead of bain or bat, it's mi bait. And you can offer that on like some kind of a form, like when you ask people, you know, I don't know what the entry forms are like in membership, but like when, you know, do you have any yard sites you want us to remind you of? How would you, what is your Hebrew name? How would you like to be called up to the Torah? And then you give those choices, and then people can, you know, check off whichever one, you know, they feel represents who they are. So the other thing that you know, Mara and I had a discussion about, we went from Becky to Beth Jacob in Mendota Heights, which is, in fact, John Jay told us to go there. He said, if you like Becky, you're gonna love Beth Jacob, which was true. It was very similar in feel. And I guess in terms of being LGBTQ there, the difference was, and this is something you cannot control, because I think maybe not true, but people don't necessarily move to New Haven because it's a great place to live, even though it is, but people move there for a job, or, you know, whether it's the hospital or Yale. You can't really control, you can't, like, I don't know, maybe you can, but, you know, projecting to the world like, oh, we're LGBTQ friendly, and then you get more LGBTQ people. Well, it just depends on whether the person, you know, coming to your community, you know, is LGBTQ because they, you know, they got a job there. So, however, the community that we did move to, there were a few more LGBTQ people there. And when you have like 10 in a community of 400, everybody thinks it's a gay synagogue. So whatever to that. We were like 4 at Becky. And it didn't feel like, you know, a gay synagogue to everybody. But the difference also at Beth Jacob, I think, was that there were LGBTQ people on the board. And even if you have 3 gay people in your shul, or queer people, I should say, in your shul, if you have one of them on your board and they're, you know, in the leadership position, then you put people at ease, because they might feel, maybe this is true or not, that their interests are represented in the leadership. And that's really important. Okay, now, I'm going to stop right there. Oh, one other thing we talked about was that somehow you can project, somehow, like whether it's in a pamphlet or on your website, that you know how to create ceremonies for LGBTQ people, which could either be, for a trans person, a transition ceremony, or a name change ceremony, or that you don't necessarily do bat or bar mitzvahs, but you do whatever cute names they're using now, a bar mitzvah or a mitzvah, like, you know, for a non-gendered person. Kids, oh, so now here's where I just want to shift a little bit into statistics. I don't have them in front of me because my computer is in the shop. So I don't have my slides, but kids are coming out on average at the age of like 14 or 15 now. 10 or 20 years ago, they were coming out at the age of 23. So that means that kids are going to come out around their bar mitzvah time, bat mitzvah time. And that's often when a kid who feels that they are trans is like confronting this reality inside themselves. And that's when they start to question, oh, wait, am I a bar mitzvah? Am I a bat mitzvah? So it's going to come up, you know, potentially in your community more and more as kids come out younger and younger. So you might want to project that to the world, that, you know, put parents at ease, put the kids at ease, that they're going to be included in that way. Okay, so now I'm going to pause for a minute, and there were a few questions in the chat, but I also just wanted to open it up to folks for discussion. How does this all sound to you?
Good. Now, you know, usually when we open it up for discussion, we have people indicate in the chat that they have something that they want to say, so that we can call on people in order. Does that work for you, or do you want?
Sure. Yeah, that's great.
And are you looking for questions at this point?
Sure. Questions or points
or comments?
of discussion, like comments, things that people want to say. And it looks like, yeah, someone's in the waiting room. Okay.
So Joanne, you have a question. So Joanne, do you want to, or Rob, do you want to unmute and ask your question?
Joanne.
Joanne.
So it sounds to me like there are a lot of parallels with what you said to our own experience. We have two children who are Asian Korean by birth, and they were very accepted by Becky, but there was nothing explicit. And she was talking about this a few weeks ago, actually, at a schmooze, and trying to figure out where she fit in being Korean and Jewish, and there wasn't anything discussed about it or even kind of acknowledged. They were just accepted. So I think that your suggestions are absolutely fabulous. They're concrete, and I think that they could make a real difference.
Oh, good. And absolutely, this includes other groups that are marginalized, and you want to have the right language on your website. You want to have the right images on your website. Jews of color, other marginalized populations, people with disabilities. You want to really project that you're inclusive, because I know that Becky is inclusive, but you want to make sure everybody else knows that.
Can I make a comment?
Sure.
Yes.
So, Miryam, I want to raise a difficult question, and I'm not even sure quite how to frame it, and I'm not even sure it's quite a gay lesbian issue, but I think it may be. So, our congregation, and I think the Jewish culture is very family centric, and so like when you bless someone, you bless them saying, may you come to the Torah and may you come to the chuppah, and the life cycles are around family. And a lot of the, like even the way we sort of think about our kids programming, again, it's sort of very family involved. And so I'm wondering, for people who are not quite sure about their gender, or who are, is that a problem to sort of come to a place that is sort of, forgive me, I'll be crude. It's about breeders. Everybody here is about having kids and getting married and having, family and being together. And I mean, is that sort of off-putting to a portion of the gay or lesbian crowd?
Yeah, so I don't think it has anything to do with gender or sexuality, whether you want to have a child. Right. I think that what's hard is for people who don't want to have a child, whether you're straight or gay or whatever you are,
right.
Whoever you are, like just the pressure to have children is so incredibly strong in Jewish culture that people feel like they won't count if they don't have a child. And that's hugely problematic for people who are just don't want that. And, when I was trying to figure out if I should have a child, my friend said to me, you have a choice. And I said, I do? Like, I had no idea that I had a choice, and I think nobody should ever have a child if they don't want one. That's like basic stuff. So I don't think you're excluding anybody by, talking in family language, but I do think you need to include language for people who are single and for people who are childless, because the unit in Judaism is so like family oriented. And you have people who are infertile, who are having trouble having a child, like same thing, you got to be careful around that. Also with marriage, like you just reminded me, the Torah, chuppah, umasim tovim, like there's some other language that people use, like not chuppah, but like ahava, like you want your child to have love in their life, not necessarily from one person or from a partner, but love. You just want them to be loved. I want to go to the very first question in the chat from Eva Schragus. How would I know if someone is not cisgender? My question for you, Eva, is why do you need to know that?
So I specifically sent it to you anonymously, but that's okay.
Oh, I'm sorry, Eva.
You want to out me? You can out me. I will take responsibility. The thing is, I don't see any reason for me to know. When someone comes in and presents as, I don't know, they're laying tefillin, they're putting on a kippah, they wear a talit, that's what they do. And I just say welcome, and I ask if they're observing something or if they need to have a, an aliyah or something. But I don't need to know at what stage of cisgender or transgender or orientation. Nobody asks me what I do in the privacy of my own home or in the public places where I go. Why do I care what other people do?
Right. So you shouldn't care, but it wasn't about privacy. Your question was more about their gender. And I would say the question more becomes when you don't know what pronoun to use with somebody, like if they're presenting as androgynous or, so one workaround that a lot of organizations or institutions do is that they put their pronouns after their names so that everybody does it. And so that there is no question and everybody could feel at ease to not be misgendered. I think
Sorry,
it's really
I grew up without a gender and in my language. So can we just like develop a non-gendered, because in English we don't have, oh my God, I can't think of the adjectives that are gendered. It's not like Hebrew or French.
right.
So can we just like pick a G or something where it's just
that's up to you. That's up to your community if you want to do that. But I hear you. And I don't know what language you grew up in, but Hebrew is very gendered, much more than English. So it becomes a little problematic sometimes with the liturgy. But when you could do Z, you could do a lot of things. But people aren't really used to that. So you could put your pronouns after your name, which projects that you, especially on Zoom, it's so easy, next to your name, so that you're projecting that it's not an assumption that we know each other's gender. And there are people in your community who are probably a different gender at birth and you assume that, that they were based on how they look now. So you can't make any assumptions. And I think that that's the main thing about gender, is that you should never assume. Okay, so let's see. Are there any other questions or comments in the chat? Oh, okay, Helene, this was to everybody. So I'm gonna say this is from Helene. This is important. My eldest, Jonah, is in transition. She had a bar mitzvah as a boy when she was 13. Should I refer to her bat mitzvah? I would say, ask your child. Because
from Isaiah, who's sharing my computer.
Sorry?
The question came from me, not from Helene. From
oh,
Isaiah.
Okay.
And Jonah is my child.
Okay, so I'm talking to you and whoever else. This is a great question. In general, when you have a child who's transitioning, they are going to have possibly very strong opinions about how you refer to their past. And how you refer to their bar bat mitzvah, or if you are allowed to tell people the name that they had that you gave them when they were born. So you just have to just ask your child, it's very simple.
So
and
it
will change. Possibly.
So far, she has indicated no indication that she wants to change her name.
Okay.
So that's not an issue yet, but I was just thinking, I struggle with the pronouns. I'm getting better at it. And, but, when I'm thinking about a past event that occurred, she had a bar mitzvah when she was 13
right.
And as far as I know, at that point, she wasn't identifying herself as female. So I'll have that conversation with Jonah, I think.
Yeah, I think Jonah will appreciate it, because it's very personal, and there's no one answer to that question. It's just depends on the person, what they want, I think.
I think one of the things that you said, which is so important, is not to make assumptions.
Yeah.
And it's very easy to do that. And, I'm a nurse midwife. I work I do women's healthcare, and we've started asking everybody across the board about gender identity and sexual orientation. And I cannot tell you how many times I'm surprised by the answers I get. Some of these people I've known for a long time. Some of them are new to me, but basically how I would read them when they walked in the door is not so similar to what they're telling me. A lot of young people who are literally not sure is what they'll say to me. I don't know what my sexual orientation is right now. So
Right.
it's just the idea always to keep in mind, because I think we're living in a society where things are much more open, and luckily there are more options and feeling of choices. I know it probably doesn't feel like that to the young person who's going through it at the moment, but it's much different than it used to be. And so people are going to present in lots of different ways, and you cannot make assumptions about anything. And so that's the lesson I keep telling myself, because I'm constantly surprised.
Right, right, for sure. I'm sure you see it very clearly in your practice.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's really wonderful comments in the chat. There's a lot of history at Becky in the chat. Let's see. I'm glad to see that Lyndon and Jonathan have been on the board, and I know on the kiddish team as well, Lyndon. Let's see. If anyone's looking for a fascinating and helpful paper by a couple of philosophers arguing that we shouldn't generally use gender pronouns. Okay, thank you so much for that, Max. I'm going to check that out. Okay, it's complicated. That's what I'll say to your comment. Max, okay, Tablet Magazine had a really interesting article, some good ideas about gender neutral Hebrew workarounds. Yeah, there's some people working on the Hebrew language around this. So there's some good links here in the chat. Okay, do you guys still have did we ever have a gay pride kiddish at Becky? I feel like we did that when we were there.
Twice. We've had two.
Yeah. Oh, in the entire history of that you've been there, Lyndon?
I know that I've done two myself.
Oh, okay.
Well, maybe there are more than two.
Okay. Yeah,
Not
depending
very
on
many though.
Right,
Not
right. So it's a nice thing to do. It's a simple thing to do. It's a way to have somebody sponsor kiddish, you know, and it could be colorful and fun, and it projects that you are taking a moment to acknowledge your LGBTQ members. It's very simple and important to people. So, okay. And Sasha's saying, I think people would appreciate to be asked what pronouns to use. Yeah, but I personally find it a little awkward to sometimes approach somebody who presents as androgynous or gender non-conforming, I should say, and ask them their pronouns when I'm not asking the person next to them their pronoun.
Right.
So I personally find that awkward, but definitely some people do appreciate being asked so that you don't misgender them. I'm also assuming, and I think I remember, that there is a gender neutral bathroom at Becky.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, does it say like gender neutral or something like that? Or
it's weird because I think it has a symbol of a male and a female, right? Is that the one
okay.
upstairs? And it's a handicapped bathroom as well.
Okay. Right. Right. Okay, Rachel has a good idea. Put pronouns on the list of people's Hebrew names.
I'm working on redoing the, there's a booklet with people's Hebrew names. We are very much in transition with absolutely everything, and that booklet is one of them.
Wonderful. Okay, yeah, there's some good ideas in the chat about what you're asking people on the forums. You definitely could do that, Lyndon. You could go around in your group meetings and say what your pronouns are. I find it, even at A-Shell, I find it a little sensitive or like stilted sometimes, and I know that I should just dive right in, but in our community, we can't always do that because we're working with Orthodox rabbis and they will just completely shut down if we do that. I don't know if at Becky you have that similar thing and you're not trying to do the same thing that we're trying to do at A-Shell, but that's just to say that I think you have to think about your culture. But I think you guys can do this, and it's not going to be a big deal at all.
Yeah, I think, what you and I spoke, Becky, we pride ourselves on being very welcoming and very open and open-minded. And I think we really are, truly. But,
Yeah.
one of the reasons I wanted you to speak is because I always think there's more. There's always more. If you've got a majority of people whose orientation is one thing, we probably need to have our minds expanded a little bit or a lot.
Yeah.
And that's just human nature.
Right.
To think of things through this perspective of ourselves.
Right.
And how we look at it.
Absolutely. It's great to do an internal assessment. Look at all your forms, look at the images that are on your website, check out the language. When people walk in the door, what do they see? Will they feel included automatically by your signage? Okay. Max is saying that he's proposed to the ritual committee to try to switch to a gender neutral default formula for Aliyah calling. Right. We just started this minion in Northampton, and we thought, okay, everybody should be Nala Amod, which is just a very gender neutral, please stand up when you call people to the Torah. We didn't go that direction because we just thought some people do want to be identified as male or female, but it's definitely easier to just do one thing for everybody. Okay. Who else? Anything else? Any other comments, questions, thoughts?
Yeah, I had a comment or sort of a confusion, I guess. I think we're always in danger of leaving somebody out. And, so we do certain things for people who have disabilities. We have, hearing things, we have visual things. We have chairs that'll fit heavier people, fat people, accommodate, and certainly sexual orientation or gender. But there's other things out there, and we probably haven't even thought of them yet. Bald people or people with, who knows what it is. And it gets to the point where, well, first of all, I think asking people is intrusive. And like, who else are we going to leave out? If we put a sign, a rainbow sign or whatever, I don't oppose it, but I'm just wondering, there's so many marginalized converts. Do we have a sign, we welcome converts, we welcome this, we welcome. Becky, I think we had one of the very first gay Shabbats many years ago, maybe 15 or 20 years ago. I don't know if that's what Eva was talking about, but
2004 was the first one I'm aware of.
2004, right? So 16, 17 years ago. And I think, I'm not sure, but I think the general culture has been, we welcome everybody and we don't point it out. We don't say, you're fat, you better sit in that chair, and you're, so it bothers me to sort of start pointing things out or, being welcome. I mean, our new rabbi is Mexican, so do we say we welcome Hispanic people, we welcome Asian people, we welcome Turkish people, like we're going to leave somebody out.
Yeah. I mean, I totally hear what you're saying, Donna. Like I said, at Becky, like Mara and I never felt excluded. So we didn't feel the need for a particular invitation or signage, or it would have been nice because then we would have known before we joined. And I think what you want to do is look at populations that have felt excluded and marginalized. I don't know if people, like you said, bald people, like, and you were joking, but like, whatever, like.
I mean, I wasn't joking necessarily.
Maybe not, but like, are
with the yarmulke,
you
can't pin it on.
Okay, whatever, that's, they have to deal with that. But
should we have yarmulkes?
Has that person been rejected in other places? Has their civil rights been taken away from them because of that? And I think that's what you want to look for, like historically, has that group been excluded, you know, in society? And then you want to say, well, we at Becky don't exclude people, you know, from that group. I hear what you're saying. You want to like include everybody and it's like going to be endless. But yeah, so I think you have to have that
Yeah, I mean,
conversation,
I'm just
but I don't think you
could
should say, okay, let's get rid of the, you know, the sign on the bathroom that says wheelchair accessible, or, you know, you're not going to do that. You're going to say like, we provide access. And you want to do that for marginalized populations, I think.
But I think we don't even know who feels marginalized is the issue.
Right.
And, you know, people feel marginalized for different reasons. And
Right.
I'm not at all sure that we know what those reasons are, and that including, you know, some people might make those that we don't specifically include feel more marginalized.
Mm-hmm. Anyone else have any thoughts
I
about
think it's
this?
a delicate question.
Yeah, it is a delicate question. This might probably not for now. Like maybe this is a more in-depth, you know, conversation amongst your leadership or, you know, your community.
Mhm.
I think Sarah has a question
Yeah,
or comment.
clap hands first. What I wanted to ask was, so I was going to say is, so this might be a case of like Black Lives Matter. So as they explain, you don't tell the firemen to come and put water on the two houses on either side of the building that's burning. You put the fire on the building that's burning. So it could be putting a sign out at this point. That's LGBTQ queer. Those are all, it's more of a problem now than say bald people. Just as the, yeah.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Jonathan, you have your hand up.
So traditionally, at least the way that we found Becky was word of mouth. So it was always billed as all-inclusive and very true to that. But there was never any major advertisement either. So it was almost like finding the secret garden, right? So,
Right.
you know, I guess the question becomes, all right, so you're taking a leap of public facing it more, which I think is a good thing. I don't think there's any real downside to that, at least off the top of my head. But, you know, just to talk to what it's been in the past, you just sort of, you find out, you ask around, people say, hey, you got to come to Becky, that's where you really belong. And then there we are. So that's what it has been. So from an inclusivity standpoint, it's been extraordinary in that, if not explicit in that. So it's sort of a, well, and also from a standpoint of being called out, right? If you don't want to be called out and you just sort of want to fit in as a larger group, it serves that purpose too. So there's so many different sides to it. It's sort of hard to quantify it, but that's just where we came at it from.
Yeah. So it sounds like you didn't need the signaling. You just knew because other people told you.
We were told, when who was it? We were shopping, I think it was Libby Abraham we bumped into in Stop and Shop. We were scoping the Stop and Shop during Pesach to see whether this is a community we want to move to, right? See whether it has some kosher food. And it's like 70 miles of kosher food. Pesach or that Stop and Shop. Bumped into Libby and saw us in there, said immediately, you should join Becky. So we poked around a little bit and then very quickly joined Becky after we figured out that, yeah, this is exactly the type of place we wanted to be.
Right. Would you have been turned off if it had been like more projected on the website or in the material? Okay.
I don't think so. No.
Yeah. Okay. John, you had your hand up?
Yes, I did. So if it's okay, I want to change the topic a little bit to sort of programming and pastoral care. And the Becky has a lot of programming, a lot of pastoral care that's aimed at sort of a mainstream person's life. You have birth, you have death, you have marriage, you have children, you have naming. And what I'm wondering is, because I'm not gay, I don't really know, are there other key moments in a gay person's life that might want to have ritual around them? I mean, you mentioned one, which is if they're transitioning. I mean, clearly that's an important moment, but I wonder if there are others. I don't know the answer. I'm just asking, is there other things that you might want to have as part of your programming so that people who have a particular experience, they feel like they can get help with whatever the experience they're going through?
Right. It's a great question. I don't know. Does anyone have any thoughts about that? I have to think about that.
Well, I would like to comment. We could just turn off the computer and talk to each other. But I think that these moments of transition are very important. Whether it's discovering your sexuality for the first time or understanding it in a new way, transitioning, changing your name. And I do think it would be nice to have rituals, public rituals in our synagogue to recognize those moments. I don't know what that looks like, but it's like those are huge moments. I mean, there aren't that many of those of life's momentous occasions that are as momentous as those, right? There's birth, there's death, there's joining with another person for marriage or whatever you want to call that. And then, something like transitioning, changing your gender orientation or making public what you've known all along. That seems really momentous to me. And I would like to think that there's a way to do that within the embrace of a community.
Yeah. I mean, yes. And you could publicize that in some way, like, whether you're celebrating your life cycle events and then you give bullet points for all of them, including coming out. I mean, what I think about is like, if somebody is single and childless their whole life and they're a part of a community, how do they get recognized and celebrated and held up? And are they going to throw a kiddush for their birthday? Like, maybe, but like, there's a lot of pride, that you feel when your child is having a bar mitzvah, bat mitzvah, or wedding, whatever, or if you're having a wedding. So how do we like celebrate people who are not going through the stereotypical life cycle events? And I guess that's what I think about more than
yes.
Should we say like, yeah, we do coming out ceremonies, like, okay, yeah, that would be amazing to do that. But and this is not about LGBTQ, this is just about people and how do they feel like the community is holding them, So I don't know. It's just a question I have. I don't have an answer necessarily.
Very good. Yes.
I see a couple. Are there more questions? Rachel Edelstein has a comment. Rabbi Rebecca Alpert has written a nice blessing for coming out. She wrote it specifically for lesbians, but it's pretty adaptable, and it's in the chat. Thank you, Rachel.
Yeah, thank you. That's great. I'm wondering if people can share. I don't know if this is something that people know about, but would you say you're hearing more now? And again, some of this might be private, so don't feel a need to say, but for children coming out, like, are you seeing it more in the younger generation, whether it's, in the gender department or sexuality?
I mean, I guess I can address that as an ultracocker who came out at a time and a place where such things weren't ever really discussed. That, at least from what I've observed, we do pretty well in terms of just as kids are maturing into who they're going to be, just kind of like de facto rolling with it. And it's not clear to me if that's something the kids themselves want to have a big deal made over or not, but I would leave that to the parents to let folks know if that's something that wanted more publicity or acknowledgement.
Yeah, yeah, good. Okay.
Sarah had her hand up, so.
Oh, I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
and I've managed to forget what I wanted to say.
Oh.
Well, while you're thinking, I just want to respond to something Rachel wrote, which is,
Oh.
not assuming everyone is in a couple or family. Becky does a good job, not couple pricing on events. So I don't know if you have family memberships or household memberships. That is a workaround. We're trying to encourage Orthodox shuls to not have memberships that are based on a man and a woman living in a marriage, in a home, but rather to say household or single or other ways that have nothing to do with family constructs or gender.
Yeah.
Betsy wrote, can you explain they, them? I wish my 15-year-old were here. She does a great job at this, but I'll try. I don't know if anyone else wants to do better than me, please feel free to speak up. But my experience with, I want to say, I don't like to be ageist because it's not necessarily about, well, it's not necessarily about age at all, but it is about generation. So I think people in the younger generation now are, I wouldn't say they're eradicating gender, but they are identifying, some people identify with non-binary ways of being, you know, neither male nor female, which I actually think is very wonderful in so many ways. If that would only trickle down to our societal roles of what men are expected and women are expected to do, then I think, you know, it will heal our society in a way. But I don't know that that's why some people are using they, them. I think it's more that they don't want to either identify as male or female, don't feel that they are one or the other, but also maybe feel that they are both, and they're thus the plural. And I also have heard, this is all anecdotal, people find it really hard because grammatically it doesn't always work. And some people who love grammar feel really rattled when they have to like use these weird ways of saying, you know, they, them or whatever. But Betsy, I hope that helps. I'm not sure if I totally captured. When kids use they, them all the time when talking about people in third person. Okay, I'm not sure what that comment means, but okay.
Rather than saying
when the
he,
kids-
she.
When they're talking about somebody, if they don't
talk
know.
about their friend Reed, they say they do this or that, even if it's one person. But even if they don't know the gender, they still say they and them.
Right. Well, if the person wants that pronoun, then they
no. Even if they know the gender, even if it's a trans person that they know the gender for, they always use they and them.
Okay, I've not experienced that, but I trust that you have, and that, and you're saying, Sasha, that's confusing?
No, I just
clarifying. You're just noticing it.
Them is used.
Ah, okay.
It puts everybody on an even playing field in a way, right? Like, so you're not making assumptions one way or the other, or
right.
And they don't differentiate between people who are gendered or not gendered. Everybody gets they, them.
Right, it's like, it's a way of eradicating that problem.
Yeah.
Okay, go
Yeah,
ahead.
I've also heard that they went to they, them because people were already hearing that about when you were being general, talking about people in general, so you're not talking about a specific gender, it was they, them, and people were already using that in the language, so they just went to they, them, rather than going to the je or they singulars.
Right.
I am one of those I didn't realize I was quite such a stickler for grammar, but it has tripped me up many times. And I dislike they, them. I wish, I mean, the way I look at it is there's already a learning curve. I wish they had chosen to go je or they. But I'm not the one making the waves, so I just
Yeah.
gotta get to ride along.
Yeah.
But it was
Yeah.
the way I had way I read it and the rest of it, people were already using they and them when they were being non-specific about a gender, and even when they were being when a person was being specific non-specific about a group or a person or a type of person. So they felt that it was an easy transition to go to they, them,
Right. Right.
to be
Yeah.
non-gendered.
Right. Sure. Yeah. Yeah. People can use that if they're not sure, if they just want to just be safe, misgender someone. Anyone else?
Yeah, I think Joanne has a comment.
Yes, I agree with you that I think that there is a certain amount of the younger generation being much more accepting of this and trying to do away with gender. We talk about this all the time with my daughter. The other day, we were in a group and she is a 5-year-old, and someone was saying, would you like to have a baby brother or a baby sister? And my daughter piped up, or non-binary. And I giggled like Shoshana giggled, and she got mad at me, and I was like, okay, I think I'm pretty open, but being my age is kind of hard to wrap that around, to feel really comfortable with that.
I giggled, but it's because I actually think it's so great. And like, it just adds another thing that I love about your daughter.
Right.
Because, this whole business about like gender reveal parties, why do we need to know? Who cares?
Right.
Miryam?
Well, can you
imagine for her daughter, by the way?
You did.
I mean, can you imagine hearing that somebody just had a baby and not asking, is it a boy or a girl? Like, it is such a natural, or just like maybe it's not natural. We're trained to want to know that. Challenge yourselves next time you hear someone had a baby and just see how long you can hold off for knowing if it's a boy or girl.
Miryam, do I remember correctly that when you guys had your baby, you didn't immediately give it a gender, even though you knew a gender and there were like gender neutral colors? I sort of
no, we just, you might be remembering that we couldn't figure out what her name was, and we were freaking out because we couldn't decide. And then we were like, we had the baby naming scheduled at Slifka, and we were like, no, we didn't. No.
Oh, okay.
I think
in other couples.
No. We never did that. We were shocked she was a girl. We were like prepared for a boy, but I don't know. Yeah.
So,
okay. Well,
Rachel made a comment. I just want to get it in here that she said, and I think we covered this, if you use they all the time to speak about others, you don't need to keep track of what people individually want. You don't have to ask them. So that's helpful. Donna Levine, did you have another comment?
Yes, thanks. My son's partner identifies as they, them, non-binary. We have a lot of problems with the verbs and all of that. But the thing that I think, Miryam, you mentioned, it's a generational thing. And I think what is it's not offensive to me, but I guess it sort of rubs me the wrong way, is that my generation fought to have the umbrella of, women or female be so all-inclusive that, anybody could feel comfortable being female and have any role and not have to reject that. And so when I see the younger people rejecting that, it's sort of rejecting women's lib, kind of, or that whole movement of our generation. So
that's exactly why I can't stand the word queer.
Exactly.
Right? Because we fought so hard to put lesbians on the map, and now we're just going to make everybody one thing without understanding the history of what the struggle really was.
Yeah, so Donna, I don't think everybody, I wouldn't say that, I don't think everybody wants to eradicate gender. I just think they want to know that
No.
it's okay to like not identify as one or the other.
Right, but I struggle with it. I've read about it. I've but it's I just that the non-binary more than anything else.
Right.
I feel like I understand the other identities, but I don't quite understand the non-binary. It almost reminds me of multiple personalities. It just doesn't.
Yeah.
And it's becoming more and more common in the younger generation. And I just wish some people didn't feel like they needed to do that.
Right.
To identify as they, them, that they could comfortably be whatever gender they pick.
Yeah. It's interesting to ask, why do you feel that you need this? Or why does this work for you? What wasn't working for you with having male or female identities?
I think that from a social interaction perspective, being male or female, gender asks for different behaviors. There's certain behavior that we will accept from men and that we will not as much accept from women, and vice versa. And I think that if you can be neither, then you can be more free in how you express yourself without having to be concerned about how you're perceived as not being female enough or not being male enough.
Sylvia, would you feel comfortable sharing your comment yourself, or do you want one of us to read it?
Oh, sure. Yeah, I just put it in the chat, which is saying, right, that I think, right, I think there's sort of a way of, a way of sort of shifting it as, non-binary people are not rejecting womanhood any more than cis men are rejecting womanhood, right? A man who's out being a man isn't rejecting being a woman, they're just a man.
Right.
And it is the same thing for non-binary people. They're not rejecting the gender assigned at birth. That's just not their gender. They're just something else.
Right. That's what I was alluding to also. Thank you, Sylvia, for articulating that. I don't think they're saying nobody should have the identity of being a woman or a man. It's that they themselves don't necessarily want to be one of the or the other. They don't feel that they are one or the other. Okay, any other comments, questions? I encourage you all to continue this conversation. It's a great conversation to have.
I just had one thought. The comment that by using they, we're not having to be specific about all these different people. We can just use it generally. That also may mean that if we use a they with some people, they may mean that we're rejecting what they would prefer to be, how they would prefer to be referred to. So there can be a downside in that. I'm just concerned about that.
Exactly. That's why we decided not to use an Armenian Nala Amod for everyone. We wanted to say, Ta'amod or Ya'amod, and because some people want to be identified with a gender.
Although I bet there were a lot of interesting conversations, because both ways of looking at that have, deeper meanings in a way. Like, one way is that we're all the same essentially in some very fundamental ways. And the other is we're all different and we want to express that difference. Right. It's not an easy, I don't know which one is better, but I could see that that's a very complicated conversation.
Yeah, it is.
Well, Miryam, thank you so much. It's really, really wonderful to see you. And I want to mention too, because I did not introduce her in the beginning and she might be gone. Rachel Bashevkin was our tech host. There you are. And she let people in and helped us keep things running. So thank you. I'm sorry I didn't mention you earlier. She also set up recording of this session. So this will be recorded and you can find it in a few days, probably next week, on our website. And Miriam, I still drive by your old apartment sometimes and wave,
Aw.
because I still remember when you lived at the other end of my street and we would hang out. And I guess Northampton isn't really that far away, but for some reason we haven't seen each other in a while. So we'll have to
Hopefully
change that.
soon. It
Yeah.
could be that thing called the pandemic, but
That
yeah,
could be
we
the
will have
pandemic.
to.
It's true. Now that that is seems to be fading, hopefully we'll be
Yeah,
able to make other plans. And maybe you'll come to Becky in person and see everybody face to face. That would be awesome. And your whole
I would
family.
love to. I would love to. That would be great. Yeah.
You
Yeah,
know,
yeah,
you and
very-
I, at your little baby that's now a big teenager.
Yes, yes. She was in diapers when we left. It's kind of crazy, but yeah. All right. Well, thanks everybody. Great to
Thank
see
you
you
and good
all.
night.
Thank you.
Have a good
And
night,
stay
everybody.
cool and comfortable and dry and all of that. It's great to see everyone.
Take
Take
care.
care. Be
Okay.
well.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Yeah, thanks.
Bye.